As of Dark Tidings, there are currently 10 cards in the game with multiple base bonus Ember. Surprisingly, all 10 of these cards come from only 4 houses total, those of Dis, Sanctum, Shadows, and Untamed. Naturally, 4 of these 10 cards come from House Untamed, the house historically associated with burst and speedy Ember generation, so we'll start with those ones first. The first of these cards is the iconic Dust Pixie. This is a small, 1-power creature that gives you 2 Ember upon play. Since the rarity of this card is set at common, it can often appear in multiples within a deck. As a result, the Dust Pixie is a key component of the fastest decks around. Combined with cards such as Hunting Witch, Nature's Call, and Key Charge, the Dust Pixie is a big reason why OTK, or one-turn kill decks exist. Dust Pixie was only around for one set, Call of the Archons, and hasn't been seen since. Up next is Fuzzy Gruen, a true icon of the game of KeyForge. Like Dust Pixie, Fuzzy Gruen gives you 2 Ember upon play, except he has 5 power instead of 1. However, due to this significant increase in power, Fuzzy Gruen also gives your opponent 1 Ember upon play. This can make Fuzzy Gruen a little tricky to play because if your opponent is only 1 Ember away from check, playing Fuzzy Gruen will put them in place to forge on their next turn. Also, Fuzzy Gruen is a rare, so he doesn't appear in all too many decks. He's certainly a nice bonus to find in your deck, but he's definitely not a critical component. Fuzzy Gruen has appeared in 4 sets up to date, those of Call of the Archons, Age of Ascension, Worlds Collide, and Dark Tidings. And Dark Tidings is where we'll find our next card, which happens to be a variant on Fuzzy Gruen, known as Deepwater Gruen. Just like Fuzzy Gruen, Deepwater Gruen is a 5-power creature that gives you 2 Ember upon play. However, his text reads, Play Reap. If the tide is low, your opponent gains 1 Ember. Bringing the tide into the question makes this an interesting card to play. If the tide is high for you, Deepwater Gruen is a no-brainer, but if the tide is low, it makes you look at the game state a little closer. Do you let your opponent get the Ember from you playing Deepwater Gruen, or do you take 3 chains to raise the tide and prevent that from happening? And you have to be paying attention to the tide and ask this question every time you use them to reap as well, adding yet another twist to this creature. Interestingly, where Fuzzy Gruen was a rare card, Deepwater Gruen is a common, and with cards like Chelonia in the set, multiples of Deepwater Gruen can become quite alarming. The last Untamed card with multiple bonus Ember happens to be the card with the most base bonus Ember in the entire game, and that card is Fertility Chant. This card gives you a whopping 4 Ember upon play, a whole 2/3 of a key, though it does come with the drawback that your opponent gets 2 Ember upon play. This makes it even trickier to play than Fuzzy Gruen, though sometimes that 4 Ember is just too tempting to pass up, especially if you have a key cheat in hand or on the board, like a Key Charge or a Key Frog. The massive burst potential this card possesses makes most Untamed key cheats incredibly easy to pull off, and it's another important factor in many of the fastest decks around. Fertility Chant made its first appearance in Call of the Archons, then went on a hiatus for a while until the 2 most recent sets, Mass Mutation and Dark Tidings, where it fits in quite well with those sets' playstyles. And seeing as this card does appear in those sets where enhancements exist, sometimes you'll end up with a Fertility Chant that has 5 Ember on it, like this one right here, and that truly is a sight to behold. Moving on from House Untamed, we now come to House Sanctum, which has 2 cards with multiple base bonus Ember. The first of these is Virtuous Works, an action that only appeared in Call of the Archons and that gives you 3 Ember upon play. And that's literally all the card does. There's nothing else, no additional text on the card besides its flavor text. Personally, I find it interesting that Virtuous Works doesn't give the opponent Ember or anything, seeing as there are Untamed cards that generate less Ember and still give the opponent 1. But perhaps those Untamed cards needed their drawbacks since Untamed was such a speedy, bursty house to begin with, whereas Sanctum's defining quality is certainly not its speed, and cards in House Sanctum that give multiple Ember at once are few and far between. The next Sanctum card is nearly identical to Virtuous Works, and it's called Strange Ordination. This card appears in Dark Tidings, and it's pretty much Virtuous Works but with a condition, and that condition is play only if the tide is high. Once again, you've got to ask yourself a question before playing this card, and in this case that question is 3 Ember worth 3 chains? Unless the tide is already high, or I have another card in hand or on the board that'll raise it for me, like Marshall Ewer, this is the question that runs through my mind every time this card shows up in my hand. In my opinion, this condition that must be met for Strange Ordination to be played makes the card a much more balanced version of Virtuous Works. Moving on to House Dis is yet another card that gives you 3 bonus Ember, and that card is Ritual of Tognath. This is a rare card that has only appeared in 1 set up to date, that of Mass Mutation. Mass Mutation also happens to be the set with some of the best destroyed triggers House Dis has ever had, Numerous Disc creatures steal Ember when they're destroyed, or deal damage to enemy creatures, or, in the case of True Brew, gain you 5 entire Ember upon their destruction. Destroying 2 friendly creatures doesn't usually sound like a good thing, but in the case of Mass Mutation, it's rarely a hindrance, and it's almost certainly worth the 3 Ember every time. Dis's other card is an infamous one, Pitlord. Widely regarded as one of the worst cards ever, Pitlord gives you 2 Ember upon play, has Taunt, and reads, while Pitlord is in play, you must choose Dis as your active house. Pitlord appeared in both Call of the Archons and Age of Ascension, and in both sets, playing him out would force you into a corner more often than not. Sure, 9 power is a lot of power, but by the time either you or your opponent can get rid of him, you'll probably have no discards left in your hand, nor will you have any disc creatures left to use. Well, maybe 1 or 2 if your opponent hasn't wiped them out already. Ultimately, Pitlord is pretty much never worth the 2 Ember he offers, and is an immediate discard 99% of the time. Thank goodness he's a rare. The last house to be covered here is that of House Shadows, and it too has 2 cards with multiple base bonus Ember. The first of these is a Call of the Archons card called Ghostly Hand. It gives you 2 Ember upon play and reads, if your opponent has exactly 1 Ember, steal it. This is a nice card because even if your opponent doesn't have exactly 1 Ember, you still get 2 Ember for playing the card, and if they do have exactly 1 Ember, then you get to steal it, adding up to a whole half a key. Ghostly Hand is also a common, allowing it to appear multiple times within a deck, making for some unique burst potential apart from stealing, an ability found in very few other places in Shadows. The final card for this video is Early Birds, a Dark Tidings action card that has Alpha and reads, play, ready each Shadows card. I think the choice to make this card an Alpha was a smart one, because if you could play this card in the middle of your turn after having used a bunch of friendly Shadows creatures, say Freebooter Fae or Captain Nobeard or One-Eyed Willa, that would be pretty busted. And this card fits in perfectly with Dark Tidings because there are numerous opportunities for your opponent to exhaust your creatures, in this case your Shadows creatures, during their turn. And if you have Early Birds in hand, then you can play it down and return those creatures to their ready state like nothing ever happened, and get 2 Ember for doing it. And those are all the cards in KeyForge with multiple base bonus Ember. From the massively synergistic Dust Pixie to the destructive Ritual of Tognath, cards with multiple Ember are always a pleasure to see in a deck, unless it's Pitlord of course. As the sets have progressed, these cards have definitely become more balanced, as we've seen with cards like Virtuous Works evolving into Strange Ordination. The designers of the game have even developed various methods of dealing with these oftentimes powerful cards, such as Infernus, Creeping Oblivion, Master of the Grey, and Mindfire. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I truly do enjoy making these videos, and any amount of support is incredibly meaningful to me. So if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to Aembermedes for more KeyForge content like this, and drop a like. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. See you later.